Good evening, everyone. My name is Courtney Becknell Wagasback. I'm the Visitor Services Coordinator at Whitney Plantation, and I want to welcome you all to our panel discussion today. Say it loud, I post and I'm proud. Social media as a platform for social justice. Let's introduce our panelists for this evening. We have Kendall Lawson, President of Student Chapter for National Association of Black Journalists. Dr. Charlene Senegal DeCure, Assistant Professor of History, author, and review panelist for the National Endowment of Humanities Summer Stipend Program. We also have Dr. Tia Smith, Assistant Professor and Department Head of Mass Communications, Bell South Professor of Mass Communications. We have B. Mike, who's a visual artist and filmmaker, founder and director of Two Cent Entertainment, LLC. With us, we also have Colleen Murphy, Program Coordinator at the Center for Ethical Living and Social Justice Renewal. And last but not least, Ms. Jane Johnson, Executive Director of the ACLU Foundation of Louisiana. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's jump right into it. Starting off with the first question. In a commencement speech, Shonda Rhimes stated, "A hashtag is not helping. Hashtags are very pretty on Twitter, but a hashtag is not a movement. It's you sitting on your butt, typing on your computer, and then going back to binge watching your favorite TV show." Is Shonda right? Who wants to take that question?
I'll take it. I think she's totally right, obviously, because the thing is, if you are, again, behind your computer and you're typing out what you feel and there's no action behind it, then what are you actually doing? Granted that if you're putting it out on that platform of social media, you're getting it out there for others to read it and to contemplate about it. But then again, you still have to have some type of action to warrant what you have said.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to also add that I agree. But I also think that it's a way of disrupting cyberspace. So there is a type of disruption that's happening for the hashtag movement, perhaps one that I'm not accustomed to because I'm not a part of that generation that, I was more on the ground and, embodied activism and disrupting physical spaces. But I think there's something to say about the disruption of the cyberspaces as well. But I do agree that words without action is nothing.
I disagree with Ms. Rhimes, and really I feel as though it's interesting to see the criticisms of, like, we use the word woke, so I'll use that word in its context, the levels of wokeness, and I feel as though it's not at the moment when the person opens their eyes that you complain, why they were asleep for so long. I think it's an opportunity to engage and to ask for more. It's like, okay, you tweeted, you hashtag, now what's step two? You know what I mean? So I feel like that I'm critical of, to tell somebody who tweets and hashtag, that's not enough. You know what I mean? And I feel like we have to acknowledge that there's various entry points to movement work, you know what I mean? And there's various levels of movement work, you know what I mean? Like, there's necessary roles on all spaces. Everybody is not going to be able to physically show up. But there's a role for people who are behind their desk or using their phone. You know what I mean? So I feel as though, the goal of her argument, I think, is a great one. We would like for people to be, we would like the base level of engagement to be at a high space. But that's also a privileged perspective because everyone isn't able to get up and go. You know what I mean? Like, what about those who are limited to what the tools that they have? So that's why I disagree.
Do you think it's I'm sorry.
No.
Do you think it's like the hashtag movement is silencing some of, Shonda Rhimes' point is saying, well, that's not enough, that she's urging them to be silent, or?
I just feel like it's interesting to, well, one could take it that way. If someone is engaged in that capacity and if they get that pushback from someone who they might look up to, Ms. Rhimes, and they be like, oh, dang, I was doing what I could and it's not enough. And I think that's true across the board on all levels. You're always gonna have people who, what is enough? Those who tweet, people are gonna say it's not enough, you have to show up. And those who show up, they say, well, it's not enough, you have to vote. And those who vote, they say it's not enough, you have to run for office. Those who run for office, it's not enough, you have to be president. You know what I mean? So it's like, where do we we can acknowledge that all of those positions are necessary. All those levels of engagement are necessary without having to say one is greater or less than the other, you know.
So just picking up on your comment about an entry point, I mean, I think she goes too far when she says a hashtag is not helping. It does help because, you know, you can raise awareness of issues online, you can build an empowered community online, and you can build trust online. And once you have that, then you can take the next step if you're able, and that's taking action, and that's where you get a movement.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. Without awareness, we're unable to act. So definitely a hashtag is the first step to that. But every action needs to have, every tweet needs to have an action behind it. It's one thing for you to sit on your phone and just tweet all day, but what are you really doing with the issue? You need to bring awareness, but you also need to interloop the people who are also aware and as passionate about the subject as you are. It's one thing just to tweet about it. It's something else to tweet about it and then go to these communities where people are impoverished or go to protests. There needs to be some type of end result, something that you can show for.
But do you agree, or what do you think about the thought that it's our responsibility, those who make that criticism, to say, okay, you tweeted, now here's step two? Because I think oftentimes we're in spaces where people feel as though I engage by tweeting, but I don't know what's next. You know, I'm aware now, and I feel as though, you know, there's all these references in history, but I feel like there is a lot of value in showing someone this is what's wrong, and letting them be, once again using woke, but letting them wake up to that, you know, to realize that, you know, to kind of shatter this perception of the status quo and say, okay, this is not what you should be used to. And I think that's what hashtag movements have done. It allowed people to realize, wait a minute, this isn't cool. You know what I mean? And so I feel as though the responsibility should be on individuals like Ms. Rhymes or those who are critical to say, all right, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's step 4. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that I wanted to mention, this isn't a Twitter thing, but a Facebook thing. There's an organizer in New Orleans that I've learned a lot from, Rachel Lee. She works with Rethink. And she did something to me on Facebook a few years ago that at first I thought was really pushy, and then I had to really appreciate it, where she had posted some awesome thing. Now I don't even remember what specific thing it was, but it was, you know, some like raising awareness about issues of systemic racism, blah, blah, blah. And like a lot of people, I liked it. She then like direct messaged every person who liked it, being like, hey, how are you doing? I noticed that you liked it. I want to really ask you to take one of these 3 following steps,
Right.
you know, and just like outline stuff. And just like, that's brilliant. Like,
Yes.
that is totally, because sure, we can all, you know, for whatever reason, like, we're living our lives. And it only takes a second to be like, yeah, yes, I believe that. And then we've got something else we've got to do. And so having the person who was putting the information out there then take it another step to circle back and be like, and.
Yeah. And direct the action to the hashtag. So it's not just the hashtag. I mean, it's very important to have it out there, like you said, just to have people woke. You know, we understand what's happening and with social justice and everything, but again, you have to take it a step forward. Like,
Yeah,
and so
true.
even if those people are doing the hashtags, then maybe someone who sees the hashtags might ask a question and say, well, what do we do next? And then it's a conversation that comes from there, but definitely there needs to be some type of action with the hashtag.
That's true. And to your point, it does disrupt. Like, we cannot not credit hashtags.
Yeah.
Like, hashtags have definitely disrupted the spaces all the time. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not like as if the hashtag movement is weak. Like, I think that's a not a good. That's part of what I also disagree with. Is she kind of like made it as if it was a weak thing to do, when truthfully hashtag movements have like transformed our conversations in a lot of places. So. It is sometimes enough to show solidarity by retweeting or posting. We can argue whether it's enough, but you're doing something.
Right.
You're definitely doing something.
And the hashtags they're very important because it's how young adults today, it's how we get the message, it's how they get the message across, I should say, because I'm 40 years old and I have a Twitter account with like 5 followers. I don't even remember my handle, but I think that's just with a little bit of an older generation, but with the newer generation, this is their social activism. This is how they get the word and the message out. So it is very important to have those hashtags, but again, like I said, it's important to have it, but it's also important to follow it by some type of action. Somebody has to do something in order for the movement to continue and move on, because if everybody is hashtagging and no one is doing anything, then nothing is getting done. So, it's kind of like somebody got to be the chief of the Indians.
That's arguable, but I see your point. I mean, I think one of the values of this current movement that we're in is that there's a lot of value in the fact that it's a leaderless movement in a way. I think this generation has learned from the past, and they've learned that when there is a leader, all you have to do is take out the leader, and then the movement is without a head, and it just goes away. So I think the fact that there isn't you can't pinpoint, even though Black Lives Matter is an organization, but you can't pinpoint a face of it. You can't pinpoint the charismatic voice of it, because if that were the case, that there would have been a lot of work done to silence or to discredit those voices, and then the many people following would be lost, as we've seen in history. So, I mean, I think about this a lot because I'm always dancing the line between, is using the tools we have enough, or should we take more of the traditional tools that has been passed on? And I mean, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like respecting a basketball player. You know what I mean? I could respect
Jordan?
Yeah, I can respect Jordan and say he's the greatest of all time, but if I'm a coach today and I have a team that I'm trying to beat, I don't know if I'm gonna put Jordan on the court. You know what I mean? I could learn from him and say, okay, Jordan, you've done great things. I'm constantly in awe of what you've accomplished. But today, it's a different type of game. You know what I mean? So I feel as though there's a lot to be learned from the past, but to just completely discredit the new tools and say it's not good unless you're doing it the way Dr. King and
Right. It's a
so.
different context for them.
Yeah.
It's a totally different context. So, and then we need to respect the young voices, the newer voices as well, and then the tools that they're using. So.
Good. Those were some good comments. I appreciate that. Okay, so we've pretty much answered this next question, but I want to go into more detail. Since we agree or disagree with Shonda Rhimes, that's fine. But one thing that we know is that online activism is present. It's a full force. How do we connect online activism with boots on the ground activism? Or how do we disconnect it? But most importantly, how do we bring the two together, if it is possible to bring the two together?
I think that's the problem, trying to merge the two together. That's the biggest issue that we have today, right? We have to try to figure out how to bring all of those activists that are sitting behind their computer doing the hashtagging and all the social media stuff and bring them into an actual platform of where they are protesting and doing that kinds of stuff on the grounds. So I think that's just a disconnect. We have to figure that stuff out. And, to go back to the point that we don't necessarily have a leader for like Black Lives Matter movement and so on. So to me, that's another somewhat of an issue, because then who's making the decisions and who we're following? Is it a committee of people, or, so I think we just need to get everything a little organized better to try and figure out ways to bring both of those things together. Because if we were able to bring both of those things together, then we'd have a powerful movement, because we'd have all these young people who are participating in the movement, as well as, participating via social media, as well as participating on the streets. So.
I would say that posting, in my opinion, is actually a form of boots on the ground, because if something gets enough retweets, if you get enough reblogs, enough posts, if you get enough viewership behind that, action will happen. And a great example of this is the H&M incident with the coolest monkey in the jungle or something like that. Twitter went into a frenzy where the hashtag was the top hashtag for 2 days straight. And from that, H&M is closing down stores. They've apologized. And then there was a lot of and there was protests in South Africa where they destroyed a store. So even when people read these tweets, when people are tweeting, they're upset about it. And so that's a form of just direct action in itself, because if the companies are reacting and changing themselves, then to me, that's success. It's not the level of success that we want it to be at, but it's one of the first steps.
And I think if you compare and contrast the similarities and the differences, I think between boots on the ground, if you're using the term boots on the ground to say like physically protesting, and there's a lot of similarities. I mean, like the civil rights movement understood like protests and marches were a publicity stunt. You know what I mean? They understood that this was a way to obstruct the visuals, to get on the news, to get on the newspapers, to kind of, you know, so it's kind of the same goals that are what's, it's the same goal of like the hashtags and online movements. Is like the goal is to, like you said, to be the top hashtag, to kind of to take over the conversation on the news and on print. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities. I think it's just we're just tied up in the nostalgic of what movement work is supposed to look like, and I think there's a lot of things that this newer, younger generation, younger than me, are even like challenging, and they're and part of it's a product of, in a lot of ways, against and for the previous movements. People in this generation, they don't want to go to a meeting. They don't want to have to sign up to say, you know, I'm a part of this organization, and only then am I allowed to participate in and have my voice heard. And so I think there is like this movement that's kind of like, you know, they don't feel welcome in the church, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not like similar, like past movements where it was tied into the church. You know, when you look at who are the leaders of all these different new movements, you see why. You know, there was it kind of like rejected from the church. And so it's kind of like this against the traditional methods. And it's fascinating to see. No movement, I think, is perfect, but I think it's on its way to figuring itself out. I'm rambling.
Yeah, I could remember when, as a student at Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina, I was very heavy into activism, particularly around the Million Man March. And from the Million Man March, we were boots on the ground, but we also organized in our local communities in Greensboro. But what if we had hashtags? What if we had social media? Imagine the impact that we could have about shedding light about what we were doing right there in Greensboro. So I think there can be a nice marriage between social media activism and boots on the ground activism if we begin to talk about those differences and talk about the similarities and begin to have the conversations, the intergenerational conversations about, hey, we're all having the same goal. We just have a different way of getting there. How can we work together to get to that goal? That's what I think.
On this matter of engagement, I'd like to answer from the perspective of a civil rights organization and what it can do to promote engagement. The ACLU, for instance, it now has a huge social media presence, which is new for a lot of civil rights organizations. But now they've come to realize, look, it's not just about lawyers in an office filing lawsuits. I mean, I'm a lawyer, I file lawsuits. I think that's marvelous. But, you know, you have to amplify your power. You have to be proactive. You just can't wait for people to come and knock on your door. You have to educate people, first of all, about what their rights are. You have to raise awareness about the issues where rights are being violated. The ACLU does all this on its webpage. You provide legal advice for people who are affected by the injustice. You know, you give photos and a lot of action stuff, which is the kind of thing that kind of tends to, you know, get people a little more, you know, motivated. You provide information about direct action that people can take. Hey, if you want to, the court is here in this case on such and such a day. Here's where the courtroom is. You can go. The city council has taken up this ordinance on surveillance cameras that are going to be following you everywhere you go. You want to go and you know, show up. Or click right here, write a letter to your city councilman that says, you know, I'm against this. And you do it all on multiple platforms and let people, you know, come in and, you know, engage where they want. And if you go to go online and check out the ACLU, you see all of that, you know, right there. Blogs, Facebooks, tweets, you know, the whole thing.
So it's very powerful. And
Yeah.
get that information out, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think there's also, to think of it, sometimes my brain is a little too literal, but like to think of it in boots on the ground in like a real literal way. Like when I'm on Twitter, which I am a lot, I'm not usually sitting at my computer. I'm using my phone. And especially if I'm out at a protest or a demonstration, I'm checking in on Twitter and using Twitter. Like the most dramatic experience I had with that was when David Duke was at Dillard University, like a year and a half ago. We knew there was going to be a big protest, and then it turned out to be much bigger and more dramatic than the organizers were prepared for. And when people started getting maced, there were no street medics, and there was nobody present who had anything to help people immediately with their eyeballs. And some of us started tweeting, we need street medic support, we need help. And folks are out there. Like, there are folks in New Orleans who are paying attention to, New Orleans social justice Twitter. There's totally a network of folks who are there for each other and are ready to be deployed. Later on that night, when most of us thought it was all over and people were going home, then on the way out, a handful of activists were blocking the exit to try to, realistically, you're not going to prevent David Duke from leaving, but you can at least make it really difficult for him. And so that's what they were doing. And they had laid down in the street, and it was clear people were going to start getting arrested. And so again, we started tweeting out, we don't have any legal observers here. We're going to need jailhouse support. We're going to need this. And we totally got it. People were paying attention. For me, at my job, we do a lot of advocacy for folks. Sometimes that just means showing up at somebody's hearing and just being a member of the community, showing that members of the community are there with that person. When I'm on the bus on my way to work, I'll be reading Twitter, and if I see that there's something going down at the courthouse or at a city council meeting that I know my boss would want me to be there at, I'll text her and see if I should detour. Like, Twitter makes all of that able to happen
In real time.
so much faster. Yeah,
Yeah.
in real time. There have been more than one occasion when, because of something I saw on Twitter, my whole workday plan changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to me, that's like, you can't get more boots on the ground than that,
So there are definitely people utilizing social media to stay connected, and this has had a major impact on the way we share information with each other, and that has also impacted the movement. So moving along, let's talk about the challenges that we face when we talk about using online activism. Do you think that when it comes to getting people involved, I know it's an easy way to get more people involved, but do you think it creates more opportunities, or does it create more challenges for the movement?
I definitely see it as an opportunity, because I think it is an entry point that has a wide range of options in terms of where you can go from it. But everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have smartphones. A lot of people have access to internet, even in places where it's overlooked or it's forgotten. And we've seen time and time, story after story, where no one's paying attention until someone used it as a tool. So I see it as an opportunity. It's a new set of rules. You know what I mean? It's a new set of challenges, but it's definitely, I think, all positive. I think, like the comment you made earlier, I think if only, I can imagine that Dr. King would have wished that there was a system in place like Twitter or like Instagram, or, you know what I mean? Like, so it definitely is a beautiful, beyond beautiful tool. It's a weapon, and like any weapon, it all depends on how we choose to engage with it.
Mm-hmm. There are challenges. I can think of a couple. Government snooping. It was documented through Freedom of Information Act requests that the Department of Homeland Security was mining social media platforms for information on Black Lives Matter. And this kind of activity can tend to, what lawyers call chill your First Amendment rights, make you less willing, make you cautious about going out, and speaking. That's a challenge. The business practices of the social media companies, they can change their policies anytime they want. They may decide, we're not going to maximize the visibility of Black Lives Matter content, or maybe this material here is not so attractive to our advertisers. There's also other First Amendment issues. Just a little background, first of all. The First Amendment runs against the government. The government shall take no action that interferes. So the government can't come and shut down Facebook or internet or Twitter. If the social media companies start taking action that restricts your access to social media or your ability to receive information from social media, if it's the companies, the private companies that are doing that, you can't stand up and say, hey, Twitter's violating my First Amendment rights. The government is the only one that can violate your First Amendment rights. Now, you have First Amendment rights on the internet. You can say whatever the heck you want on the internet with the same limitations on as what you could say if you were speaking right now. You can't use obscenity and so on. The internet is an open forum. You have First Amendment rights there. But here's one of the challenges. The government, knowing that it can't directly limit your access to information on the internet, is trying to pressure the private companies to do that. There have been, the ACLU filed a lawsuit to get information from the government about meetings it was having with different private companies, because what they were doing was they were trying to do an end around the First Amendment. Okay, the government knows we can't do this directly, but if we can get you all to filter your content, to, let's see, what are some of the things they were trying to get them to do? Create government-friendly content. Oh, that would be fun to read. Monitor activity, tweak algorithms to change the availability of certain posts. The best response to that probably is by what people did when the whole net neutrality thing came up, and they just flooded and said, oh, no, I don't think so. But in terms of challenges, I think this government subterfuge is something to definitely keep our eyes out for.
Another challenge, I think, is actually getting the correct information out, right? Because it wasn't there Russia that was tampering with the Black Lives Matter movement, and they were filtering in all of this negative information about the movement that really turned off supporters towards the actual movement. And it also had some people in the African American community thinking, oh my God, these guys are radical. So just getting the right information in, the correct information in, can be a challenge as well, because again, it's the internet. It's just like Wikipedia. Anybody could write something on there, and is it true? Is it factual? You still have to go back and then look at all of the facts and do your research in order to figure out if this is the actual true information that we're getting, and then go from there. So I think everyone has to kind of do their due diligence when it comes to supporting a cause and making sure that it is the correct information that is being displayed.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments on opportunities or challenges when it comes to online activism? All right, well, since we spoke a little bit about Black Lives Matter, let's talk about them in more detail. We know that Black Lives Matter, their presence here in Louisiana and across the country kind of took over social media. It made us aware of a lot of things that we already knew that was happening in our communities, but then we started to see that it's actually happening in other communities. So I want to hear your opinion. How do you think Black Lives Matter impacted the social media activism? Do you think it catapulted different issues, or did it make it hard for people to actually, like you said, with the false information, did it actually make it harder for online activism?
Racial injustice has been happening for centuries. So Black Lives Matter, the hashtag, has really brought light to the issue and has gotten more people who have not known about the issue upset about it. That's why it keeps trending, and that's why people are still constantly passionate about it. That's for me.
Yeah, it's brought attention to, like you said, a lot of injustice that's happened throughout history, especially police brutality and so on. So whenever we are opening up a Facebook Live post where someone is being mishandled by the police and it's completely unfair and unjust, and then we see the hashtag Black Lives Matter, that is something that we actually see. That's information that is happening in real time. And so we don't have to go out and look to, see, hey, what's actually happening. We see it for ourselves. And so I think that type of platform, just bringing that right then and there, what is happening right then and there, and letting people make up their own minds as to the circumstances behind it, I think that has impacted the Black Lives Matter movement a whole lot.
And to add on with that, Black Lives Matter has birthed like certain hashtag and subgroups like Black Twitter or Black Instagram, where people, or like Hispanic Instagram, Hispanic Twitter, like where people of certain enclaves join together and they talk about issues that they're facing in their own community and that they're seeing people that look like them are facing. It's giving them that opportunity to have that sort of dialogue, and that dialogue is being picked up worldwide.
Mm-hmm. So do you think there's a danger of it becoming too trendy? Do you think that it's overkill at some point with the hashtag Black Lives Matter behind every social justice, racial injustice issue that comes across the web? Do you think that at this rate it's just a trend and people won't actually be working towards fighting against it?
So are you asking, is it the overuse of it, maybe questioning the legitimacy of it?
Yes.
I think it's a good thing if it becomes trendy. I think it still has a sting. You know what I mean? I don't think it can be diluted. I think you still have people who, the minute you say Black Lives Matter, have an alternative opinion and don't like that combination of words. So I think the more it's used, I think the more it's activating people, the more it's challenging the way people think, the more it's, you know what I mean? So I think, at least I can understand how, I could use stories. I just did an art show in LA where I'm kind of critical because I'm like, yo, there's definitely a social justice industry. You know what I mean? There's definitely, and I'm coming to terms with that, like trying to understand the fact that there's an industry out, people are making money off of the idea of social justice. And so there's that happening, but I still think at its core, the ends or what's happening is you're getting a lot of people who are waking up, a lot of people who are beginning to see the light in a way that makes them challenge and even be critical of Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? I think if it not been for Black Lives Matter, people wouldn't be critical of it to even help it to be more intentional and more courageous. So I think all these things I see it all as positives.
I don't think it's trendy as long as the main media outlets are not really reflecting the frustrations and injustices of real people's daily lives. And as long as they aren't giving that kind of coverage, then Black Lives Matter, for instance, shows, it keeps people from, it prevents erasure of things just being erased. If that's trendy, I guess trendy is okay.
You see, no, that's not okay. If something is just trending and trending and trending forever, that means there's no end result, there's no consequence to that action. It's nice for us to see this hashtag every day, but it's pretty soon it's going to be like, oh, here it is again. Oh, here it is again. The meaning of it becomes more and more so insignificant than it was the first time that you saw it.
I think that is within the spectrum of what's possible, but I also think that I firmly believe that in the words of, I think it was James Baldwin who said, he was like, we live in a sunlit prison of the American dream. And that the whole idea is that, a lot of these movements is not to hand out keys, you know what I mean? It's like DJ Khaled got the thing with the major key alert, but I think the goal has always been to shed light and to let people understand, look, this is the situation that you're in. And then people are courageous and smart enough to be like, oh, word, bet, this is where I'm at. I'm gonna get out. You know what I mean? So I feel like in a lot of ways, social media activism, Black Lives Matter, has done more to just shed light. The response to that, I don't think, is up to Black Lives Matter. Is not up to the organization. It's up to those who are starting to see the light to start to shift the culture and shift the status quo. And so that's where I get my hope from. The thought that the more it's spread, the more it's talked about, the more light's being spread, the more people are like, bet, let me get out of this. Bet, let me figure out a way to change this system. And that's what we've been seeing. Like, look at all the leaders, look at all the voices that were inspired by this movement. I mean, look at the example of the movement itself, how it was created. I think it's a testimony to what's possible with the tools that we have today. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how,
I'm
please
sorry.
go.
Yes. I'm just thinking about the impact of Black Lives Matter, and I was at a meeting yesterday, and white people were talking about white privilege, and the way they entered that conversation was through the entryway, of Black Lives Matter. And then they began to talk about white privilege and talk about, okay, what's my impact? What's my role? So it's starting conversations. And I think that's very, very important. So we're able to talk about and talk around and talk through and hopefully collaborate and work our way out of it. Go ahead. Kendall?
Well, my question for the panel is, how do you inspire people that have become so desensitized to the hashtags, to the things, to the videos that they're seeing? How do you inspire them to start taking action? Question mark.
Question mark.
Question mark. I mean,
I just feel as though, like, you have to keep doing what the hashtag intention, what the intention of it was from the first place. You know, I think there is a certain level of status quo that even in our own communities we buy into. You know what I mean? Like, prior to the movement against the actions of police officers, there was this sort of just level of normalcy. You know, it was like, oh, this is the hierarchy of, you know, dogs chase cats, cats chase mice, police beat up black people. And it took that type of shock to kind of force people to realize this isn't the status quo. And so I think the more we shed light on what's happening, the more we offer the proper information, the more we say, these are the statistics, this is what's happening, the more people have no choice but to realize that there is a response that's necessary. So I think anytime there is a numbness to it, I think you just have to remind people, you know, find some new information, show them the Ava DuVernay documentary, let them read the new Jim Crow, you know what I mean? Like, I think we have to just keep funneling information and hope that people are going to take that ball and run with it.
yeah, because people get fatigued.
Yeah, definitely.
And activism is hard work.
Definitely.
And leadership is hard work. So you got to keep rolling with it. And so people are not gonna always be receptive, but that doesn't mean you stop talking or stop hashtagging.
And I think it shows too the power of moral outrage. I mean, one of the bases for success of the old school civil rights movement in the 60s was moral outrage. Look at what's happening. And to the extent that you can use social media to remind people that, hey, you know what, this is outrageous, this is immoral, I think that is I think that's a real motivator.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old, and my 5-year-old asked me, he said, Mama, what is Black Lives Matter? And so, you know, he's 5, and it's like, how did you even learn about this? But he heard it. And so if it's trending in a, you know, in a good way, because I have a 5-year-old that's asking me about it, and then I could talk to him in the terms that he understands and the way that he understands and say what it's about. Because I remember last year for Black History Month, he came back from school and he said, Mom, I know how Martin Luther King was died, and he said the police beat him up and killed him. And I said, well, that's not exactly what happened. You're mixing that up with, you know, this is part of Black Lives Matter movement, and this is why, and so on. And so you have people as young as that, and then you have people as old as my grandmother, 90 years old, and she's saying, like, what's happening? What is this Black Lives Matter movement? What is going on? And then she connects that with, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King and everybody else, and she says, well, it's the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's been going on forever. So it's a good thing. You know, it's bringing the young people in, the old people in, and it's getting people to talk about the issues that's happening. So I think that, you know, the trending is a good thing, and even though we see it often a whole lot, Black Lives Matter movement, if we don't see it a whole lot, we forget about it. So that's just, I think, the era that we're in right now. So if it's not in our face all the time, then we start to fall asleep and think everything is normalized again. And we start to forget about, hey, the police brutality is still out there, or the social injustice in the jails. I mean, that's still out there. All that stuff is still out there, but it has to stay in mainstream media for us to continue to think about it and think about ways that we can change it.
Mm-hmm. And I do believe, to your point, that there is definitely a metric system of wokeness that you can just, like Walmart sells on Walmart.com, you can buy a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And so within that alone tells you that there's like this certain metric system of just, you can fake the funk, you know what I mean? You can kind of like embody it and just not be anywhere associated or a part of it or even engaged on any level. So I think we do have to challenge that, and we do have to like continue to find ways to invigorate and just like to just put some fire underneath the feet of our generation and our community, because we can't let it get to a point where it is co-opted and it's just like Black Lives Matter is only an optic thing, you know what I mean, about rocking the t-shirt or the rubber band, or you know what I mean. So, but that requires work from us, from those who are as proximate to the problems as possible. And that's the other thing too, get proximate, get close to the issues, get close to the people who are most affected, who are most vulnerable. And then you find it when you do that it's very difficult to get numb, because you're constantly engaged outside of your bubble, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Next question. First, I want to throw out some names for you just to get you thinking about this next question. Sandra Bland, Elton Sterling, Alex Wubbles, Walter Scott, Eric Gardner, Jeanne Hill, Ashante Davis, Sabrina Hooks, Philandro Castillo, Manal Munshi. Any of those names sound familiar?
Absolutely.
These are all people who have been trending on social media. I don't have I have a Twitter, but I don't really use Twitter often. I'm more of a Facebook person. So these are people that I have seen in my news feed over the last year or so. And like you were saying earlier about people forgetting and getting just getting complacent with the idea, a lot of times people had to bring up these names again to remind people that we still haven't received justice for what they went through. So with that being said, when people forget about these particular cases, and then there's a surge of renewal, I guess, so to speak, where you bring these videos up again and again and again to make sure that they don't become complacent. Do you believe that there are any negative psychological consequences from seeing those videos, from seeing videos where, whether it's police shootings or acts of religious or racial prejudice or even bullying on social media, do you think exposing yourselves to those videos over and over again have any negative consequences psychologically on the individuals?
I think that seeing those things over and over again, of course, it's going to have a psychological effect on you. But it has to, it's a part of life. It's what happened. And I think that it has to be shown. Now, whether or not you're going to play it a million times, over, I don't think that it needs to be played a million times over. But I do think that maybe the gist of it needs to continue to be out there so that people don't forget what happened. I mean, I'm from I live in Baton Rouge, and Alton Sterling, even though people don't talk about him a lot, I think outside of Baton Rouge, in Baton Rouge, I feel that it is still a big issue, and it's still a big part of the African American community that we have not forgotten about. My husband is one of the attorneys for the Sterling family, and I hear it all the time. We talk about it constantly in our house. The issues and the things that's going on, and how it needs to be addressed, and it has not been addressed, and all of the steps that need to be taken. And so my husband often goes to the rallies they have every year, and he's very involved with the family and all of that stuff. So I think that it needs to still be out there, but I don't think the actual like killing or shooting or whatever has to be played over and over. But I just think that the message needs to continue to be out there.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky. My teenage son, I definitely, like, if I had been in a position to, I would have tried to prevent him from seeing the footage of Alton Sterling's death. And yet, seeing it changed him in a way that everything I had been telling him had not changed him, you know? And so there's this huge shift that, you know, as a parent, I want to protect him. And also even, I mean, not just kids, right? For all of us, like, is there a harmful psychological effect to seeing that? Yes. But also there's a harmful psychological effect to that having happened.
To
you
live in
know?
it.
Right, to live it. And so it is, it's really tricky. I mean, I will tell you that, like, because of so many videos I had already seen and so much information that I already had, I did not watch the Philando Castile video. I felt like I don't need to see it to believe it. I'm there, I believe it. And I think we all have to, like, we have to take care of ourselves. And we have to tell each other, like, it's okay to not make yourself watch this graphic horror. But it's not okay for that to mean that then you don't believe that that horror belongs to you as a member of the human family, you know? And, like, especially for white folks. I feel like you know, like, there's just the day-to-day operating of white folks involves so much denial of how things actually are in the world and the role of systemic racism. And it's kind of like, you know, if we admit how huge and pervasive systemic racism is, then we have to admit that our whole lives and everyone in our families who we love and all our coworkers and ourselves are part of this and are part of keeping this going. That's really painful. That's really hard to do. We have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's, sorry, I'm wandering, so
No,
I'll stop.
but, I mean, it just, what comes to mind is Emmett Till, an image, and the powerful image that was frustratingly violent, painful to look at, but really pissed me off and continues to piss me off. And I don't mind being pissed off by it. You know, I don't mind that engagement with my emotions because it keeps me, okay, Tia, that's Emmett Till, this is what's happening. Watching videos about police brutality or killing, it keeps me pissed, but I'm okay with that because that means I have more work to do. And it keeps me active. So when it comes to how do I negotiate that with my children, it's a delicate balance. It's a lot of conversations. And I think about, you know, we have talks about cultivation theory and how children watch a lot of violent television and may become desensitized to violence. But then to have this understanding that, no, this is happening, this is in our community, you know, it's a delicate balance. But I don't mind. In that moment, I get pissed off. I say, okay, we got more work to do. Work can't stop.
I think that that is a balance that as an image creator and for anyone who's like a artist or a media artist, that you're constantly trying to like explore on terms of like, the line between like fetishizing the violence and honoring the legacy or honoring the humanity. And so I do think sometimes at its worst, the replaying of those images, you have to ask, you know, like, what is the fascination for whether it's being shown or why, you know, why society is responding to it. There is a shock value, but I also think we have to, not even for your own mental health, but for the well-being of the humanity of that individual, or for that individual's family, you also have to assert the balance of, this is not just an individual who was gunned down. This is not just an individual who was, you know, violently removed from life, but this is also an individual who there's so much beauty around it as well. So I think that's the balance that you have to search for. That also helps with the way you engage, and helps in the ways that you respond. Recently, I had a situation with that. You know, a group of artists, we went to the Middle East, specifically we went to Palestine, and one of the artists present, he's a rapper who has a large platform. And after we left, we sat and talked with a lot of people, and everything people told us is like, yes, this is happening, but don't forget that this is why this is beautiful. This is why this place is beautiful. This is why we're beautiful. And so there was always this balance that they wanted to assert. And then after we left, the artist, he released a music video of his experience there, but he pulled from YouTube clips of just the most violent, just to kind of shock people, let people see this is a type of treatment that's happening in this space. And we had to like be critical of him and say, that's a way to tell that story, but also, we also need to insert the humanity. We also need to insert the fact that there is a lot of beauty in the midst of the pain. And I feel like that's what we have to search for anyone who's an image creator. That's what you have to search for, just not just constantly just reproducing the most egregious and the most sensational, but also find ways to find that balance of humanity.
To see those videos on repeat kind of instills a message of, you need to be more cautious, or watch where you're at, or be careful or who you're associating with, or what you're wearing, because at any given time you may be killed, you may be shot, you don't know what's going to happen. I know personally, after Oscar Grant died, my mother didn't let me go out for the house, she didn't let us go out for the house for 2 days because she was in fear that her children, her sons, were going to get taken. And that kind of like defined my notion of what it means to be black in America. It's to be black and proud, but at the same time, you're going to still have people on your coattails trying to bring you down. And we can't escape the reality, because the reality of it is that these videos exist, and if we just try to overlook them, then we're not really going to be able to dissect the real issues at hand with the videos, if that makes sense. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, like, we need to pull out the narrative tales of what these people were going through at that time to really more so showcase all sides of the story. Because it's a reality here in America. It's a reality that black men and black people are just facing in totality. And we can't escape that because it's real.
Real.
All right, well, moving along, excuse me. I do believe that social media has played a very important role. It's created its own form of activism, and it has had some positive outcomes. Just to bring up a few issues that have been trending as well, and I want to hear what you think about it. The individual who kind of poisoned her roommate. Let's talk about that for a minute. Mm-hmm. She did all kinds of disgusting things to her roommate's personal belongings and got her roommate sick about it. They both were students at the University of Hartford, and she had been complaining about these issues for a while. It wasn't until she uploaded a video onto Facebook Live that people really started to listen, and then they started to share it. And then eventually we get this response from the University of Hartford. I'm just going to read a few lines. We appreciate and understand the outpouring of concern regarding these disturbing alleged events. University Public Safety has confirmed the case has been turned over to local authorities for investigation and prosecution. Now, many people believe that this young girl should have been charged with a hate crime because according to her Twitter post, she did it because the girl was a Jamaican Barbie, is what she referred to her as, because she was black, pretty much. So, being that she wasn't charged with the hate crime, but she was reprimanded by the school and she did receive some minor charges, seeing instances of that where there is a positive outcome, you think that it's worth it to continue using social media as a platform for activism?
Yeah, I think it's worth it. Yeah, it's worth using social media as a platform for social justice and whatnot. But I think that some people, in the case of the girl who actually did the crime, she was not very smart in using social justice herself because that's how she got caught. So sometimes the platforms could be used against a person, right? So you see a lot of times on Facebook Live or something, somebody will post like, hey, I just robbed a bank. And it's like, really? It's just like, you're really telling on yourself. Like, this is social media. Everybody's going to find out. And eventually the cops are going to come knocking on your door. Like, really? When it comes to things like that, I think that, that's a problem. But in this case, she definitely, the victim, was lucky that the perpetrator actually did post that video, because that's how, she was brought to justice.
At the same time, do we need to always rely on social media for the college's job? That this girl, she was being poisoned constantly. She placed these. My tensions with the university. That if I put in 5 complaints, why haven't you heard my complaint? Why haven't you even at least taken me in for an interview? Why do I have to gather a whole protest online for there to be a difference? And the key word of that statement was outpouring. The only reason that they decided to post or make an action or to to respond was because there was uproar, there was people pissed off, there were people mad about that. And now, had that young lady not have posted, she would have probably still been poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if anything, it shows us, all of it shows us the power of controlling your narrative and the power of just having the agency to tell your story. And I think that's like the overlying theme with the use of social media, is the tool that allows anyone to try their best to control their narrative and to have the agency to say, this is my story, this is what I'm going through. And it gives that type of platform that can lead to all these stories of response and intervention, So I definitely see it as a positive.
You have to be smart in how you use social media. And
Very smart.
I brought this as an example. ACLU blocks Trump's unconstitutional Muslim ban, which has been nominated for an award that I have to confess I never heard of, which is the Shorty Awards for the best of social media.
Congrats.
So what they had was, first of all, they had a narrative prepared for what the story was going to be. The story was going to be, first, to inform audiences that this so-called extreme vetting was really discrimination against Muslims, just like Trump had been saying on his campaign. It wasn't extreme vetting, it was discrimination. And second, that the ACLU was willing to stand up. And third, to elevate the voices of people who took action. So that was the plan. So as soon as Trump announced his executive order, there were tweets, social media graphics, educating about what was happening. Then they filed a lawsuit. So then they posted a blog explaining what the suit was all about. Then the social media manager went to JFK Airport and had live social coverage of the protesters inside the airport and of the lawyers working on their laptops sitting on the ground, at the airport. Then they used social media. The next round was to encourage supporters to show up at the courthouse. So they were telling people what they could do. And when they won, they put up a graphic and a video that was viewed more than 19 million times. So it was all there. It was awareness, information, education, mobilization, and it went out on multiple platforms. It was organized, it was quick, it went really fast.
So with that being said, what do you believe is the future for social media and activism?
I don't know. I watch a lot of Black Mirror, and that scares me. So, I mean, I feel like the more we intertwine technology in our everyday life, the more it's going to be a tool that is going to be used on all sides, to push forward the movement for humanity, and also to try and make it difficult to see each other as humans. So I feel as though this is going to keep growing. It's going to keep being a tool, and at its best, we can continue to see it as a weapon. And as technology grows and changes, we continue to use it as a weapon to make the world a better place.
Any apps or particular platforms that you think kind of carry more weight in the social media movement?
Well, I'm a Facebook girl, so I don't know any of the other apps. That's how, and everybody said that's for like your grandparents. They tell me. I mean, I don't know, but I love Facebook, so that's where I get all my stuff from.
Yeah, there are apps now that let people, after they've taken a video, to send it, download it directly to the ACLU, to the news media, whatever. So
Citizen journalism.
Citizen journalism, right. I think that's, going to be a key part as well.
Social media within the next 50 years, let me tell you something. As soon as our children be born, that's going to go on Facebook. Everything for our life is going to be automated, and it's coming. It's here now with the iPhone X, with the facial movement, everything. They're recording everybody. So just within the next 50 years, Facebook is going to become your new ID. Your Twitter is going to become your new thoughts process. Everybody's going to have access to that. So it's going to make more of a, not a level playing field, but everything's going to be more so out in the open, which can be problematic sometimes.
He watches Black Mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we do. So I've never watched Black Mirror, but I do think that we have to keep in mind that whatever, it's just like any other tool. So the FBI surveilled Dr. King and other movement leaders as best they could with the tools they had at the time. So absolutely, I believe that they are surveilling today's movement leaders and everybody else that they can figure out how to surveil with whatever tools they've got at the time. And then, that we've got to stay nimble and do the best we can with whatever tools we've got, and just stay open to it. I mean, I don't know why Twitter works so well with my brain. I'm 49, but so it's like not an age thing, but Twitter really works for me. My son is all about Snapchat. He would never have anything to do with Twitter. But I know if any of you are into New Orleans Twitter, you should look up Reverend Melanie. She is a white lady in her 60s who she's a Twitter freak. She has a huge following. She's a social justice activist, and she's out there tweeting and organizing all the time. In 10 years, if she's still into social media, she will probably have moved on to whatever the thing is then, just like some people are just really hooked into social media for whatever reason. I don't think it's really generational.
I can't say what I hope for is that within the social media spaces, because what it's looking like it's becoming more and more of with the algorithms in places, that it's becoming more and more spaces where you create a different type of bubble, where it's like all you see on your feed is just affirmation for what you already believe in. And so that's kind of what I'm afraid of, is that when I go on my Twitter and my Facebook, or mostly Facebook, is that all I'm seeing is similar voices to me. And so I hope it does become more of a space where meaningful dialogue can take place and people from different spaces can share and challenge and not just troll each other, but to really have a meaningful engagement. And so hopefully there's some new app that allows just that to occur, you know what I mean? Not just a space for your friends, which is cool because I think that's the platform that all these social media channels try to project. This is for you and your friends to chill. I wish there would be new spaces for you to engage with strangers and not Tinder. You know?
to be
But-
challenged.
Yeah.
You're challenged. If you have to blog, like, you know.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, in the words of Gladys Knight, and I think Gladys Knight says this, that you need to use your imagination and keep on keeping on. Is that Gladys Knight? Anybody?
We gonna say it's other day.
Huh?
I said we could say it's other day.
Okay. Yeah. But I think,
Mary J. Blige.
I don't think she said that,
No.
but yeah, yeah.
No, I think it's Gladys Knight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could look it up. Oh.
It could
Yeah,
be
fact
married
check.
too. Hey, hey. But the reason why I say use our imagination and to keep on keeping on is that we could create what we don't have, right? So if we find that there's a need for an app to have these cross dialogues, perhaps that will be created,
Yes.
right? So we don't have to say, I hope, well, we could just make it happen. And that's the beauty of technology, the beauty of innovation. Right here at Xavier, we have bright minds that will probably create that. So,
Right. It's also been suggested that social activist organizations might want to start looking, might not want to rely exclusively on the social media platforms, Twitter and so on, Facebook, because of all the content issues, you know, that might be coming up with government misuse or whatever, and develop their own platforms
yeah.
for directing content to, you know, their followers. That's a little, I don't know how you would do this, Lord knows how you would do this, but don't just rely exclusively on the social media that's out there now, but create your own
Create.
platforms. Right.
Creation, that's right.
Well, that's all the questions that I have for you all to answer. Panelists, do you have any last words for our audience or viewers?
Be mindful of what you post and what you say online, because there's always a history, there's always a record. Not even if you delete it, somebody may still have a record of it. So whatever you do, whatever you snap, be mindful, because if you just, the way I think of it, if it's not acceptable for your child to see, you shouldn't be doing it.
Uh-oh.
That's funny. I mean, I have children, but I never think of it that way. I tend to
Yeah.
think of it more as, you know,
Your parents, right?
text, email, tweet, whatever, as if it was all going to be subpoenaed someday. That's the mindset I try to stay in. To like keep my loose talk strictly to like face-to-face verbal interactions.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, yeah, it seems like now everything is on record all the time.
Yeah, I like to think about it like we're all branding ourselves, like with all the social medias, like we're all a brand, and treating every post as well thought out, not as well thought out, but as going through all the checks as if it was like a huge corporation trying to figure out, does this, you know, like to be strict about it as such, you know what I mean? Like, does this reflect my brand? Does this reflect what I believe? Does this reflect what I want to share about who I am? So, you know, I'll talk to students all the time, and I'll be like, people ask me, oh, can you hire me for this, hire me for that? I'll look on their Twitter, just socially, and I'm like, dude, son, like I'm not about, look at your brand is telling me who you are. And like, you could come and tell me in my face, like, yo, this is not who I am. I'm such a, you know, studious person, and but I'm looking at your brand online, and this doesn't match the brand that I'm trying to project. So I think about all my posts, like how am I branding my voice or who I am. And that kind of keeps me in check, so.
I would just encourage everyone to
Hello.
do something in terms of activism. If you have a cause, if you have a something that you believe in, whether you're hashtagging, whether you're joining an organization, whether you're starting an organization. Just be about something and do something. When you know better, you do better. And be active in whatever you do and whatever platform that you use.
Yeah, don't treat the movement like an indie rock band or like an indie band where you was on them for so long, and then when other people get on the band, you like, man, I've been on them, you know.
Yeah.
You know how people be. That's how people was with
Yeah.
The Weeknd. That's how people was with all these artists. Don't treat the movement like that. And when people wake up and they ready to show up, you like, where you was at yesterday when this happened, or where
Yeah.
you was at last week. I think we gotta think about hashtag movements as an opportunity to continue to build bridges, not to be like critical of folks because they wasn't there yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, don't tear people down. Let's do the work.
Yeah.
To add on to that point, this is my last time talking, you know, find like-minded individuals in your community that are also passionate about the same things that you're passionate about. You know, people always are always trying to like go tweet the big dogs with the 3 million followers, but what are you doing on the small scale level at your school or in your friend group? That's where you should start off at.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for participating in tonight's discussion. Thank you, Xavier University, for hosting us as well. We really appreciate it. I hope you all have enjoyed the discussion tonight, and I hope you think about what was said tonight and maybe visit Whitney Plantation and create a new discussion. We talk about several different issues at Whitney. In addition to slavery, we have several events throughout the year also. So that's a way to connect with some people that share in your interests as well. So again, I want to thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.